Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more extra history, continuing on with their series of the Siege of Vienna. This time, episode 2, Tunnel War. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Okay, Tunnel War. Yeah, I don't really have any predictions. The first episode of this series is really good. I think it's obviously, as we've been kind of going through it somewhat randomly, their series, and just picking kind of pretty much at random which series to do of theirs. It's ended up being more of their older series, which has the old host, but the new he's not new. He's new to me ish, kind of. The newer host is really growing on me, and I think I might prefer him actually now. But I think that might I don't know if it's his voice, the way he speaks, or if it's just the writing team has developed and they've really improved on their craft by the time the new host came in. That helps the new host be more enjoyable for me. I don't know. I don't know why I'm sharing that. I just feel like filling dead air with words. Let's dive in.
July 25th, Vienna. The Ottoman engineers work in the dark, chipping away at the stony soil with pickaxes and judging distance with twine. 20 feet above,
God.
at surface level, other engineers are creating trench works, throwing boards on top for a roof, and heaping them with earth so that the soldiers can approach the enemy defenses under cover. They're also setting up sandbag positions for the artillery. But down here, there's only cold earth and the toneless music of tools on stone. When the men emerge to rest, the sun makes them squint. Finally, their officer measures the distance and nods, directly beneath the enemy. The men pile bags of gunpowder at the end of a tunnel and lay a long fuse. An engineer then touches a candle to the fuse, blows on it, and waits patiently. Once it glows, he begins to run. The first day of the siege, Vienna panicked. A teenage boy dressed in women's clothing.
I will say, probably this man's deeper voice does lend itself better to narration, at least in terms of my personal preference when it comes to narration.
Possibly an actor or a saboteur in disguise, threw burning wood and straw into the city's arsenal. The door of the powder storage...
The Boom Room. Oh my god. I love that name. I am stealing that. Don't know when or how I'll use it, but I'm stealing. I love that.
Caught fire. Those soldiers extinguished it before the whole arsenal went up.
Damn.
The arsonist barely...
The boom room didn't go boom.
He made it around the block before a crowd of citizens tore him apart with their bare hands.
Oh.
The mob was so consumed with fear, they didn't even consider his value as a prisoner. They'd heard what happened in fortress towns outside Vienna. When they resisted, Ottoman troops had beheaded the leading citizens and pressed the rest into slavery. Vienna had received the same offer from Kara Mustafa.
You know, yeah, war still isn't a lovely thing. Lots of innocents still die in it. But, you know, at least for the most part, people don't take others into slavery during war. I mean, it still happens in a lot of places, though, actually, so it's still really fucked up. God, humanity sucks.
Surrender and live in peace as Muslims or Christians, or resist and condemn yourself to death and slavery. The city's commander, Stachenberg,
he has 3 eyes,
chose resistance. But those initial days of panic were done, and now the siege was grueling, bloody routine. The engineer George Rimpler had finished his earthworks. The city already had an old medieval wall studded with defensive towers, and earlier, the defenders had planted triangular fortress islands, revlins, into the dry moat that channeled attackers into overlapping fields of fire. Rimpler had augmented this by building an earthen rampart at the top of the slope leading up to the steep moat, studding it with blockhouses and bunkers that had to be taken one by one. And in front of those fortifications, he built a spiked palisade. Now, enemies had to take multiple layers of defenses, And those tunneling toward the city would emerge in the moat with musket fire pouring down on them
Oh,
from front and behind.
clever.
Rimpler had also strengthened the Revlins with extra defenses, and dug trenches between all of the earthworks so defenders could reinforce positions under assault.
You know, I feel like this is one of those situations where you can see why Hollywood gets sieges wrong, right? Like, I'm going to point to the Battle of Winterfell in Season 8 of Game of Thrones, where they're all standing outside the walls. But they didn't really... like, the part... They're like, yes, in sieges, they would, at times, go outside the walls. But it's because they built further fortifications outside the walls so that they're not, just defending the walls, so that they have layered defense. In Season 8 of Game of Thrones, there was no layered fucking defense there. The same thing happens at King's Landing, with the Golden Company just standing outside the fucking walls. Ugh. It's like they hear one thing, but then they don't think of the logic. Like, for one, I don't understand. As someone that is a creator, I write fantasy. How you're writing a story, you're filming a story, you're doing all this shit, putting all this effort and money into it, and you don't for a second consider the logic? Like, the adding the layered defenses makes it cooler. Just having the army stand outside the walls without those layered defenses makes them look stupid.
The heaviest defenses, though, were in front of the palace. Rimpler knew that that's where the Ottomans would hit them. It was the longest stretch of wall without a tower, and it was flat and dry for easy digging. And Rimpler was right. The moment Kara Mustafa arrived, he set up his command tent directly across from the palace, while his troops surrounded the city. Charles of Lorraine across the river couldn't stop him. And within days, Mustafa was testing Rimpler's defenses. Trenches zigzagged forward towards the Habsburg capital. But despite Kara Mustafa's vast advantage in numbers, he had problems. The majority of his forces were levies, not professional soldiers. And sure, they're useful for surrounding a city, but not so great in an assault. The Tartar horsemen were barely under for surrounding.
Hold on, extra
city,
history. This is not a bad... I mean, of course, that this weapon does not really have a decent pommel to it, but, this is an effective... This against armored opponents, this would be a more effective means of fighting them than using the sharp and pointy end. Well, plated armor. Or chainmail, the stabby, the pokey end would probably do better, right? I think, yeah. Chainmail protects against slashing. Yeah. Not stabbing, really.
Not so great in an assault. The Tartar horsemen were barely under his control, and they scoured the countryside. Bad roads made him leave his heaviest cannons and mortars behind, and the gunpowder sent from the frontier territories was poor. In fact, when it rained, he couldn't fire his cannons, and it rained a lot.
Why not put, a tent over it? It's not like you're angling the cannons that high, are you? You can cover unless the wind is really depending on the direction of the wind, the rain, obviously, but
through the first week of the siege, the
are you not covering your gunpowder and keeping it out of the elements? Putting it in a tent of its own? Come on.
Ottomans pushed forward toward the defenses inch by inch, digging trenches, gathering forces, and unleashing waves of janissaries on night raids to hit the palisade. In this battle between trench and blockhouse, with soldiers mere feet from each other, the primary weapon was not sword or musket, but instead the grenade. Squads lit these bombs from braziers and slowly marched, hurling handheld, faulty explosives at each other. Ottoman grenades were cased in glass and clay. They were lighter and killed by sheer explosive blast, but the Habsburg grenades were iron, and though heavy and short-ranged, caused hideous shrapnel wounds. The toll was heavy, but Stauffenberg refused a truce to collect the fallen, so as they advanced, inch by inch, Ottoman soldiers had to march past their dead comrades from previous attacks. And to top it all off, winter was coming.
Oh god.
That's what had doomed Suleiman when he tried to take the city back in 1529, the bitter cold. The Grand Vizier swore history would not repeat itself, because soon his mining tunnels would be ready. July 25th, the Palisade. Night was falling on the defenses as Rimpler inspected his works. He was concerned. The day before, the Ottomans had detonated 2 mines at the end of the line, then tried to storm the broken palisade. Both assaults had failed, but they would only keep coming. And inside the city, Stachensberg had citizens listening in their cellars. Rumors said Turks were infiltrating through the sewers. And during Mass that morning, a cannonball had smashed into St. Stephen's Cathedral and struck the organ.
Not the organ.
But here, on the line, things still looked pretty solid. Then, the earth leapt upward. Rimpler saw sky and earth intermingle, and he crashed down the wrong way. Stones rained down. He tried to wipe the dirt from his eyes and found his arm wouldn't respond.
Ooh.
It was shot through with splinters from the shattered palisade.
Ooh.
Screams rang out. Men scattered. Janissaries surged up the loose ramp of broken earth toward the gap in the defenses, swinging blades and hurling bombs. Garrison soldiers flooded the ruined gap, firing muskets and rolling grenades downhill. One of Rimpler's engineers grabbed him and dragged him backward over the splintered, studded earth to relative safety.
What a
The
loyal
line was holding.
soldier.
That attack would set the pattern for the next week and a half. An Ottoman mine would explode, attackers would surge into the gap, and defenders would sally from their trenches and blockhouses to drive them back. The Ottomans advanced, but the earthworks were slowing them. His defenses were working. But Rimpler wouldn't live to see it. He died in one of the city's makeshift hospitals.
Rest in
The
peace.
man who had done the most to defend Vienna would receive none of the credit. Yet
Oh.
by that time, Vienna's
Oh, that would piss me off. I would haunt the fucking streets of Vienna for the end of time.
garrison were trying
I'd
a
be
new
salty.
tactic.
I'd be
Countermining.
a salty ghost.
They dug their own tunnels, worming toward the Ottoman lines. Sometimes they sallied out into the enemy works, burning trench supports to destroy routes towards the city. And on occasion, they detonated a mine beneath Ottoman defenses, disintegrating the earthworks the enemies had raised to fire down on the defenders. Then, there was the most confused up-close fighting, when 2 teams of miners intercepted each other underground. Now, that was terrifying. Earth would crumble away, revealing an enemy so close you could see candlelight reflecting in his eyes. At such times, the tunnels descended into shuffling melee, with miners swinging pickaxes, then retreating before the ceilings collapsed in on friend and foe alike. And when they could, they sealed enemy tunnels with grenades or powder barrels. Meanwhile, inside the city, things were deteriorating. During the beginning of the siege, Viennese citizens slipped the lines to trade food with the Ottomans. But Stachenberg stopped that, worrying that it was an avenue for spies. So apart from a few cattle raids by the university students, he effectively locked the citizens of Vienna inside. And despite his leadership, the citizens began losing their grip as food ran low. They ate household pets, with some sardonic wit renaming cats roof rabbits. I'm with you, Zoe, that's messed up. Overcrowded and lacking sanitation, flux and dysentery chewed at the garrison. As August dragged into September, the Ottomans blew through the palisade and made a ramp up the first Revlin. And the apocalyptic panic from the earlier days of the siege returned. When the defenders took Ottoman prisoners, they decapitated and filleted them, sometimes alive, and hung their skins on the city wall.
Oh.
Then, on September 4th, the unthinkable happened. A roar from underground. 30 feet of medieval wall, right next to the bastion, bowed up, then collapsed. Through the gap, the shell-shocked defenders saw the Ottoman banners. Turkish batteries set up on the fallen defenses hammered the gap. Janissaries breached the wall. Musketeers sprinted in, trying to hold. They built a barricade of sandbags and cotton bales. Engineers, having anticipated a breach, rolled a spiked obstacle in front. And they had been lucky. The mine had detonated during a changing of the guard. Therefore, the previous shift and the fresh soldiers, both uninjured in the blast, loosed fire down the slope, shooting blind in the gunpowder smoke. Ottoman troops, sensing an end to this hellish siege, sallied from tunnels and trenches to rush the gap. They focused fire on the defenders in the gap and nearby bastion, trying to keep their heads down as their comrades tried to break through. For 2 hours, the Ottomans pushed, And for 2 hours, the Viennese held. When the smoke cleared, 200 defenders were dead, and the breach littered with Ottoman casualties. Vienna still resisted, but it was clear that the city was days, if not hours, from falling. And 3 days later, a mine took down the other end of the wall. Another desperate defense. In the distance, they could see 5 more tunnels burrowing toward them. Kara Mustafa was preparing for a general assault, and Stachenberg only had 4,000 men left. He began fortifying the city, ready to fight for Vienna, street by street. But while doing so, Stachenberg was sending letters through the line, out to Lorraine and Leopold's court. They said a relief force was coming. They'd said it for weeks. So where the heck were they? And could they make it in time?
And that was The Siege of Vienna, Episode 2, Tunnel War. Next time, the charge of the Winged Hussars. So is this a short series then? Only 3 parts? Because I'm assuming the Winged Hussars is going to be the final episode. But yeah, that was this week's episode. This was really good. I thought it was better than the first episode of this series. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.